Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kier, and joining me as always is my co-host from Long Island, New York, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
Steeler Nation, it is a dark, dark day. Let's just jump right into it. The Steelers lose 23 to 17 in overtime. Austin, while I'm thinking about it, before we even get into it, I remembered what I wanted to say. I still hate the NFL's overtime rules.
Yeah, they're pretty awful. The one touchdown ends it because it really hurts teams that have a really good offense and a bad defense. But I mean, I guess that's not the Steelers' case right now. But I never liked that for that reason because it favors whatever team has the better offense.
So
That's it.
I ask you, what was that kind of start like to this podcast? Would you say it wasn't very organized? What wasn't very good? How we just jumped right from the start into something completely random? I wouldn't say that's typically very professional, to be honest with you. But I say that in the sense that it's very similar to the way the Steelers played. But before we even get to that, we need to address what happened before the game started. And boy, we have a lot to get to with this game. But we're both very frustrated, as we're sure most of you are. But before kickoff, or actually, let's back this up a couple of days. Austin, do you remember exactly what United States President Donald Trump said regarding NFL players kneeling for the national anthem?
They should be fired. That I don't know. I don't remember the exact quote, but he was encouraging that owners say that they'll fire these players that do this for disrespecting the flag or the troops. I can't remember. I'll find it while you talk.
Okay, thank you. But in any case, I just wanted to state for our listeners that we intend on keeping this podcast completely free of politics as much as we can. We want this podcast to be about football. We want it to be about the Pittsburgh Steelers. But unfortunately, because of this, the recent circumstances, there has been attention drawn to this issue of players kneeling before for the national anthem. The Steelers made a decision as a unit today to take a somewhat different action regarding the protests, if you will, and decided as a group that they weren't going to be on the field for the national anthem. Now, it's interesting to note that the teams used to actually not be on the field for the national anthem at all. In fact, just as recently as 2008, they actually wouldn't come onto the field for the national anthem. But it's still strange because in a post-game interview with Ben Roethlisberger, him and Coach Tomlin were talking about how there was a players-only meeting on Saturday night, and they had determined that they wanted to they were either going to do something or they weren't going to do something, but whatever they were going to do, they were going to do it as a unit. And you know what, Austin, I think that makes sense to me, doesn't it?
I think it does. I can't agree more.
But here's what doesn't make sense. I was with them all the way until the national anthem, where we see one Pittsburgh Steeler player, Alejandro Villanueva. For those who don't know, most of you know by now, former Army Ranger captain, served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He was standing alone, not on the field, but just in the runway, right where you come out onto the field. And you couldn't see this at the time, but the rest of the Steelers players were standing behind him. Now, I'll get to what you have to say in a minute, but I just wanted to say quickly that I think that kind of defeats the purpose of what the Steelers were trying to do. I know that standing behind him, they're trying to make it seem like they're unified behind him, and yeah, I guess they kind of are, but at the same point, I feel like by them not being out there, it makes it seem more like he's his own individual, and if anything, it makes it seem like they're not supporting him in that sense. So that confused me a lot. And then on top of that, the coaches, who I guess it was a players only meeting, so only the players had something to do with this, but I would have thought that the coaches would have wanted to be united with the players in quote unquote supporting Villanueva in this sense, but they were already on the sideline. So it's confusing because I feel like there could have been like kneeling. Just say, for instance, Le'Veon Bell took a knee during the national anthem, and then that would raise a bunch of red flags with Villanueva being on the same team as him. So I think that they probably avoided a problem with that, but at the same time, I feel like even though their logic for wanting to be a cohesive unit and whatever they did made sense, I just think it didn't make any sense in the fact that Villanueva was standing out there alone. If anything, it just made it worse. I'd rather they have all just stood there together. Now, see, I thought it all made sense because I thought Villanueva was going to be doing this with the team. But if he's standing out there in the runway, but like still outside, I think the team should have done that. But that's all I really have to say, Austin. What do you have to say?
First, I'm going to go back to what originally started. I thought it was Twitter. I was mistaken. He actually said in a conference, wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a B off the field right now, out, he's fired. That's what started it. And then after just yesterday, since he got lashback from that from a lot of the NFL, a lot of players, a lot of everything, he said if a player wants the privilege of making millions of dollars in the NFL or other leagues, he or she should not be let disrespect our great American flag or country and should stand for the national anthem. If not, you're fired. Find something else to do. So that's really what started it, what did everything. But back to the question at hand, what the team wanted to do got completely flipped into their face. The idea was to have everyone in the locker room so the Steelers didn't get scrutinized when some players were kneeling, as we presumed. There's no definite idea that there would be players kneeling because we don't know, but I guess maybe they thought there would be. But the Steelers are a team that don't like having attention on them, and they try to stay quietly. Unfortunately, it blew up in their face. Alejandro Villanueva.
My apologies, everyone. Our Austin's call just failed. We'll get reconnected with him in a moment here. But in any case, I think Austin was trying to say that the Steelers' attempt at trying to do what they wanted to do kind of blew up in their face. So, Austin, we have you back on the line?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you want to continue with what you were saying?
Yes. Alejandro Villanueva ended up being at the front of the tunnel alone, standing with his hand on his chest for the national anthem, and that's when it became a bad look, even when the rest of the team was just behind him. Everyone knows Villanueva's story. He was an Army Ranger, and it just looks like the rest of the Steelers disrespected him and the other people who had served because for some reason he didn't stay back with the team, or the team didn't come as far up as he did. It now looks like the entire Steelers organization has taken a stance on this. When that's exactly what they were trying to do. They're trying not to let the media single out players and cause a divide, and it happened anyway. It's just kind of unfortunate. I don't. There was just miscommunication everywhere. I don't understand what happened. I don't know if it was the coach's decision. I've been hearing things that it was Rooney's decision, but it's just confusing nonetheless.
No matter how you look at it, like I said, I think it could have been handled worse, but I definitely think that even though the logic and what they were trying to do made sense, they obviously did not do that. So, yeah, the Steelers came off looking really bad there, and that's unfortunate because now that, I don't know, it's something that I feel like it could have been handled better. But that's all I think we have to really say about it. And like we said it again, we don't really want to talk about politics or this kind of demonstration. We want to talk about football. We want to talk about the Steelers. And sadly, on this day, talking about that really isn't any better. The Steelers fell to 2-1 this season, losing once again to a sub .500 team on the road in overtime to the Chicago Bears by a final score of 23-17. Geez, this game was offensive, and not just for what happened before the game. During the game, the play was offensive on both sides of the ball, and boy, what were your quick takeaways from this ugly game?
Firstly, this team is so bad on the road, it just hurts. I know I predicted a loss, but you just kind of expect better. You expect this team to actually perform like they should. Next, everyone besides Antonio Brown on offense sucks. A hot take, but true. Defense doesn't know how to tackle or stop the run, or specifically Tariq Cohen or Jordan Howard. And the Bears didn't deserve to win, but the Steelers sure deserve to lose. That's just about it. And what are your quick takeaways from the game?
Austin, we were talking about this right before we got started. I'm honestly just confused. I don't even know where to begin with the blame for this loss. It's happened year in and year out for what feels like forever under Mike Tomlin. Just all these losses to bad teams on the road, it's just a similar story, whether it's just it's always a poor game plan, poor execution, just there's all across the board it's bad. And that it starts with fundamentals, and nowhere is that more apparent than on the defense with tackling. How many missed tackles were there, Austin? I started a counter on Twitter for the second half, and I was at like 5 on one drive, and I had missed like 3 from earlier in the game, like at least on that drive. So it was like I know we've seen a lot of missed tackles, namely from Antoine Blake himself there, but like I feel like they got his entire 2015 season in one game there.
The Steelers had 5 missed tackles all of week 2. And on one play, they had 5 missed tackles on Jordan Howard. All on one play, 5 missed tackles. So if that's not telling enough, that's a crazy statistic.
And the Steelers' offense fared no better on the other side of the ball. Antonio Brown, as you mentioned, Austin, was the only player worth doing anything here. There's a lot of blame to go around, but I feel like Ben Roethlisberger and Le'Veon Bell have to be the guys to step up a little bit in order to bring everyone else up when nothing else is going right. But the problem is Bell never got going on the ground because the Steelers got behind early. And there just wasn't enough room, and this Roethlisberger wasn't able to open it up enough. I guess my last takeaway is that the silver lining for this game is that it is an early loss, and it's a loss to an NFC opponent. So it's huge that it's not an in-conference loss, and definitely even bigger that it's not a divisional opponent loss. So if you want to take the silver lining there, there's that. And the Steelers only had 6 penalties. Yeah, I know that's probably more than the NFL average for a game, but based on where they had been the last 2 games, I think it was 13 and then 10, they have been cutting down. So at the very least, I guess that's a good thing. But that's about it regarding good things. More bad news from the injury report. The Steelers' offensive line played without Marcus Gilbert this week, and then they also lost Ramon Foster for most of the game. He had a thumb injury, and he never returned after he left. Safety Sean Davis had an ankle injury. He came back on the field a couple times, but he didn't ever return to the game. Jesse James had a shoulder injury, and boy, he's been banged up all season. He still managed to return and played, honestly, I'd say pretty well given his injuries, but it was a rough day for the Steelers everywhere you look at it, and the injury report, no less, is certainly another factor. We'll have to keep an eye on that. But now we'll get into the game recap. So on offense, what did you see from the Steelers offense today?
Nothing. I'm not sure they ever left the locker room. The funny jokes. But they were putrid. Absolutely putrid. The offensive line played an all-around horrible day, continuing to struggle in run blocking and also giving up 3 sacks on the day. And also having Roethlisberger under constant pressure. To be fair to them, they were without Marcus Gilbert, as you mentioned, and they lost Ramon Foster for a good chunk of the game. But I had high hopes for Chris Hubbard, only to be let down. Speaking of Roethlisberger, he did very poorly this game, and stats don't really show it. Because I went back to look at his stats, and they weren't that bad. But
I'm sorry, Austin. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. Just looking at ESPN's rankings, I know, say what you will about QBR, but his QBR was 26 out of 100, so that's telling there. And he didn't turn the ball over, but his completion percentage was around 50%, so that's really bad.
It was 55.7. It's not the worst. That's what I was I was looking at it. It's like he didn't have an interception. He did have the fumble, but what I was gonna say, he was making what was not caught on the stat sheet was he was making bad reads and very inaccurate throws, some of which were lucky enough to be caught, but there were overthrows, throws thrown behind receivers, throws low to the ground, or even a combination of the three. Then he fumbled, and the Bears recovered early in the game, so he really didn't have a good game. The stats made him look better than he did, and even you didn't think those stats looked good, so it's just, it was really bad. He had a really bad game. But next up, rushing wasn't great. The Steelers only had 70 rushing yards on the day, which isn't good, and it just felt like Bell just kept running for 2 yards and getting stuffed. But he averaged just over 4 yards a carry, which I found surprising, and had a touchdown. So I guess it was just me being overall angry at the game. He also had the second most catches of the game with 6 for the Steelers anyway, so there's that. But finally, let's talk about the wide receivers and tight ends. Antonio Brown is the golden child that is way better than all his siblings. Simple as that. Everyone else is terrible. Actually, I'll give Jesse James a pass because he's doing well. He's been doing well, and in this game he was pretty banged up. But he's still not anywhere close to the golden child here. So, one of the most frustrating plays of the game was the first play of the game. I probably should have mentioned this with Ben, but I feel like it was 50-50 on who to blame. But Ben just barely overthrew Martavis Bryant, hitting him on the fingertips, and Bryant ended up dropping it. What would have more than likely been an 80-yard touchdown to start the game. And it was beyond frustrating to see. From then on, it just got worse for Bryant. Bryant was targeted 8 times, and he only caught 2 of those passes. That's horrible. But it's not like other receivers did much better. Juju Smith-Schuster was targeted 6 times, only came down with 2. And even worse, maybe the worst out of the 3, Eli Rogers wasn't even on the offensive stat sheet. He wasn't even targeted. Same with Vance McDonald and Xavier Grimble. No targets. The offense was completely awful, and this unit better hope that Antonio Brown never gets hurt because he's the only reason this team did anything on offense. So what do you have to say about the amazing offense from this week?
Well, I think you covered it pretty well. We've been saying the same thing for the past 3 weeks now, for the most part. Antonio Brown has been the only consistent player on the Steelers' offense. As you said, the offensive line struggled. Yes, they were without 2 starters for much of the game, but they were still relatively subpar for facing a pretty weak defensive unit. Well, I guess maybe not weak, but there's a reason they were 0-2 and they hadn't looked super good this season. Especially when you consider that this is supposed to be a 30-point-per-game offense. Ben Roethlisberger was pedestrian at best on the road again. I don't understand why he doesn't play well on the road, and I guess we just never are going to, but he's going to have to start playing better sooner. You can forget about any type of Super Bowl hopes this season. The running game was average again, at best. Bell looked probably the best he has all season today when compared to the other 2 games this season, but that's also not saying much. And he still didn't have a ton of room to run and isn't playing consistently enough, though I will say he got involved in the passing game, so that's probably some good news going forward. But, Austin, to sum it up, the other receivers on this team were worse than awful. They were the equivalent of Sammy Coates from week 6 to 17, basically the end of the season last year, meaning that they caught pretty much nothing that was thrown to them. So, I mean, seriously, look at the stats when Roethlisberger has targeted Antonio Brown versus the other receivers on this team this year. Specifically, the first game in this week, the 2 games on the road. It's staggering how bad they are when it's not throwing to Antonio Brown. Outside of Jesse James in week 1, I can't think of anyone else that's done anything right. It's disgusting, honestly. Get it together. There's no reason this team should not be playing better on offense. Like I mentioned earlier, there weren't many penalties, but at the same point, it doesn't matter when you're not moving the ball. You're not protecting your quarterback. You're not opening up holes for your running back, and your other receivers aren't making plays. If people could give a grade for this unit, I'm sure they'd all get an F. And you know what? I'd give them an F too. They've earned it. So luckily, though, the defense came through with another terrible performance, and Austin, the defense didn't inspire any sort of hope, did they?
No, but really quickly, just because you mentioned it, I found these stats earlier, and I really just wanted to mention them so I could back up exactly what you said. In 3 games, Ben is 26 for 36, or 72.2%, for 354 yards when targeting Antonio Brown. When then for targeting everyone else, he's 43 for 74, which is 58.1%. That's almost a 20% drop off. And then for 387 yards, that's just barely more than what Antonio Brown has, with almost double the amount of catches. Like that's just ridiculous, and that just backs up your stat that how bad when Ben is when not targeting Antonio Brown, how bad other wide receivers are playing. So just wanted to say that really quickly. But it's the defense is crazy. How does this team not know how to tackle? It's fundamental. It's just they were doing so well this season. It was I believe I literally just said it in the last podcast that the Steelers are tackling way better than they were last season. Because that's what I thought their number one problem was last season, was tackling. And here it is back again. The Bears' offense was one-dimensional all game long, and it was by choice because the Steelers' defense just couldn't bring down Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Both averaged 6 or more yards a carry, but that's really it. The Steelers couldn't stop these guys because Howard has the most catches on the team, and can you guess who had the second most? Tariq Cohen. Those two combined accounted for 87.5% of the Bears' yardage by themselves. That's ridiculous. A lot of their yards could have been limited. The Steelers just made tackles. On one play in particular, I mentioned this earlier, Howard broke 4 tackles and finally got taken down by the 5th guy after getting a first down on what should have been a loss of yardage. Then let's talk about the Steelers not capitalizing on opportunities. This was the most frustrating. Firstly, the Bears fumbled 5 times, and we know how many the Steelers got out of the 5. They only got 1. And on the one fumble by the center, Whitehair, they didn't even sack Glennon after he picked it up. He had so much time in the pocket after that, and he just threw it away. It was just awful. Then, on one of the Bears' last drives, the Bears were trying their hardest. And I swear, the Steelers were being handed the ball to here, just take it and win. But the Steelers refused. First, there was a fumble, and instead of jumping on it, J.J. Wilcox got ahead of himself and tried to pick it up. And that allowed the Bears to jump on it instead and just get over him. If he had fallen, he probably would have made it on top of it first. But that was the first of the frustrating plays. These are back-to-back plays, by the way. So on the very next play, Mike Mitchell drops a pick that was in his hands. And he just drops it. There was seemingly no reason for it. Just falls out of his hands. Then, the very next play after that, it's the Cody Whitehair fumble. He snaps it. The snap comes out bad. It flies back. Glennon gets it and then has all the time in the world to throw it. And ends up throwing it away before the Steelers pass rush could even get there. It was just 3 plays in a row that the Bears tried letting the Steelers have it, and they didn't take the opportunities that were given to them. This was late in the game, too. This is when the game was 14-17. It was that way for a long time, to be fair, but this was way later. The Steelers were given the chance to take it, and they just refused. So what do you have to say about the defense?
Well, it's often been the case when the Steelers lose to these bad teams on the road that the opposing offense does look a little bit better. So whether or not that's the Steelers' fault, just for instance, a couple years ago, the Ryan Mallett-led Ravens, Ryan Mallett looked really good in that game. And yeah, you could say the Steelers' game plan was atrocious, and it was. He still played well. This was not the case today. In fact, I'd say, as you were saying, the Bears did everything in their power on offense to not win this game. But the Steelers' defense wanted to lose the game just a little bit more. The missed tackles and gap control as far as rush defense goes in this game was nothing short of laughable. I really don't have any words for Keith Butler on the game plan or the adjustments he made. Other than that, repeat performances for game plans and adjustments like that earn coordinators a chance to update their resumes because they end up looking for a new job really quick. If you think about this, the Bears threw for 100 yards, and Mike Glennon completed 1 pass to a wide receiver for just 5 yards. meaning he completed the same amount of passes to the Steelers as he did to his own receivers. And the Steelers still lost. Missed tackles everywhere and a lack of a pass rush really derailed the Steelers of having any chance to make a significant impact on defense. Yeah, J.J. Wilcox had a nice interception, but both he and Mike Mitchell missed clear golden chances on turnovers earlier in the game, as you had already talked about. It's mind-boggling, especially when you consider the missed tackle counter that we were talking about. Just play after play, and yeah, they were getting a good amount of room. But if you make the tackle the first time, maybe the Bears have half of what they had. Maybe they finish with even 150 rushing yards. They might not win this game. They had 74 yards on the game-winning drive on just 4 plays. We didn't even talk about that. That super, what was it? The second play from scrimmage in that drive was a very long run. Was that Cohen on that run, or was that Howard?
The first one was Cohen.
And he has this crazy run. He outruns everyone to the right side, then darts back to the left, then back to the right, then back to the left again. There's missed tackles all over the place. The Steelers get gifted a play where he runs out of bounds. I think that he was I thought he was inbounds for that play, but the Steelers got gifted, they said he was out of bounds at his own 37-yard line. You think maybe that's a place where they can they have a new life. Nope. 2 plays later, the game is still over, and it's really hard to stop the pass usually when you are doing such a terrible job stopping the run. But clearly, the Bears had no confidence in Mike Glennon, who did his best Matt Leinart and Trent Edwards impression as captain check down. They're constantly dumping the ball. I don't even know how many passes he threw that went more than 10 yards in the air. I'd say maybe 2. I don't know. I feel like all of his passes were checkdowns or just like short curl routes, but that's just me. It was terrible, and there's no reason the Steelers should not have, first of all, held this team out of the end zone, first of all, and then second of all, they definitely should not have given up that big touchdown drive at the end. It was awful all around, and honestly, it's really tough to say which unit was worse. I guess I'd say the defense was worse because they gave up the game-winning drive, but even if they had managed to hold for a field goal, I had no confidence that the Steelers were going to be able to put together a game-winning drive there, and that's pretty much what you're going for. Otherwise, you're going for a tie there. So, yeah, that was ugly. But luckily, Austin, as if it weren't any better, or it couldn't get any worse, the special teams was terrible too, wasn't it?
Yeah, they didn't even have a good outing. On the first punt for the Bears, Eli Rogers muffed the punt, and he didn't show up all day. Just did really awful all around with not even a single target. Then there was the blocked field goal fiasco that turned into a field goal for the Bears, which was confusing in itself. That went on for about 10 minutes right as I was leaving for work, so I was trying to figure out what to put in on Twitter and stuff, and it was just all around confusing. It went from that he fumbled and it was just the Steelers' ball to, it's supposed to be a safety, to, the Bears get the ball back and can run a play, and it was just all types of confusing. But speaking of that, one of the stars of special teams was Vance McDonald and Jordan Berry, both for saving the touchdown. But really, shout out to Marcus Cooper for being such a moron and pulling a college football type move, celebrating before getting in the end zone, allowing for Vance McDonald to swat the ball out of his hand. I really feel like that's so common in college. I feel like I've seen so many players drop the ball right before they get in the end zone, and it get recovered by the other team. So it reminded me of college play, but it's a shame that Barry swatted it by accident instead of recovering it. He tried. The ball bounced in an unfortunate manner, and he hit it with his hand, which allowed the Bears to get the field goal. But if not for him, it probably would have been recovered for a touchdown. It must have been Marcus Cooper, since he was the only one down there, but I can't really remember if it really was, but he was probably going to recover it for a touchdown. So, but speaking of Barry, he did a good job punting. He averaged over 40 yards a punt and pinned them inside their 23 out of the 5 times he punted. So, also the team did good on defending punt returns, mostly because there was only one. But Tariq Cohen only tried returning that one, and it went nowhere, so that was good. But all in all, it was still a bad performance. Do you have anything else to say about special teams?
Yeah, a couple things. One, they did have a big punt return that was called back because of a penalty, so I guess you could say it was because of the penalty, but that was still a little concerning. For those who don't know what we're talking about with the Marcus Cooper play, and I guess if you've seen all those plays in college, Austin, I guess that's fair. We have seen it in the NFL a couple times too, but I feel like that's just like not even a high school move. I feel like that's a pee-wee football move doing what he did, but I digress in any case. The special teams was awful, and yeah, regarding the Vance McDonald Marcus Cooper play, what an idiot. I mean, seriously, does he not know Super Bowl history? Has he never seen the clip of Leon Lett, former Cowboys defensive lineman, slowing down with his arms extended, walking into the end zone before there's Don Beebe, Bills wide receiver, stripping him of the ball as it goes out of the end zone. And yeah, that was a different game. The Cowboys had already won that game essentially. But like it's in the Super Bowl for crying out loud, and he has to have seen that before, and here he is making the same mistake. Had the Steelers played even, had the Steelers not gone out and laid a complete egg, the Bears should have deserved to lose that game just for that play. But on the flip side, credit to Vance McDonald for never giving up on the play and showing that he was one of maybe no more than 5 Steelers on the field today that actually gave 100%, or at least looked like they gave 100%. The rest of the unit, better luck next week. They were terrible. What else is new? So let's get to our let's get to our awards. So we'll get started. I'll start with the big stop of the week since we were on this play just a second ago, and that's Vance McDonald for his strip of Marcus Cooper right before he crosses the plane. The Steelers would not have gotten to overtime had it not been for this play. And he had the best, I guess it's not even a tackle. He had the best defensive play of the game. No one else on the defense had a good defensive play, which actually means this is the 3rd week in a row that the big stop of the week has come from a special teams play and not a defensive play. Maybe the defense should start playing better instead of giving up 200 rushing yards and not picking off subpar quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks. But again, credit to Vance McDonald for not giving up on the play, running him down, and being able to strip the ball. Because even though the ball was out there and open for the taking, it's still hard to rip it away from someone before it crosses the goal line with how close it was. So he did a good job there, and he is worthy of getting praise there. I said at the time that the trade paid off itself on that play, and maybe that's not true because the Steelers lost the game, but he still did well on that play, so he deserves recognition for that. Who is the stronger than steel player of the week, Austin?
Before I get to that, you know what the Vance McDonald play reminds me of?
What is that?
It reminds me of Week 17 against the Browns last year when Landry Jones threw a pick 6 and Darius Hayward-Bay ran back to Buddy Calhoun and made him fumble out of the back of the end zone. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, I would agree. Except Buddy Calhoun was diving for the end zone when he lost the ball. It wasn't like he was slowing down. And I see where you're going there. It's kind of like a cruel turn of events for those particular players where they had a touchdown right there for them and they were inches away from not being able to get there. But yeah, that's another instance where you get stripped of the ball just inches from the goal line. So,
yeah. But on to the stronger than steel player of the week, the only one to do anything this entire game, Antonio Brown. It was only a matter of time till he won it anyway. He's the only player who did anything, as I just said, and he played like he normally does. With 10 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown, how can you not be a player of the week, especially when everyone around you sucked? So, moving on, let's finish up. You can tell us the stronger than steel play of the game.
Austin and I agreed that due to the poor play from the Steelers the entire game, Jordan Howard's game-winning touchdown ended the sad excuse of a professional display of what should not be called a game, because that was not a game for anyone who watched. That was disgusting. So Jordan Howard's game-winning touchdown, which finally ended the game. I just called it a game. Whoops. Jordan Howard's game-winning touchdown allowed us to finally turn off our TVs. Thank you, Jordan Howard, for finally ending this miserable performance for both teams. So thank you. That is the stronger than steel play of the game. Thank you, Steelers, for not providing any plays noteworthy. So thank you. So now we can move to who impressed and who disappointed. And geez, Austin, is there anybody else who impressed even a little bit in this game?
I had to really sit down and think about this one. It was really hard. I was kind of looking through the stats, trying to remember after the game, like who was there anyone? Because I didn't just want to say Antonio Brown. I already gave him the player of the game award, so I gave it to Anthony Chickolo. He already beat his previous season high of sacks by week 3 of this season, getting one of the 2 sacks the Steelers had today, and he continues to be a really good filler and outperforms his role as a backup. So I give it to him. Do you have anyone that impressed?
I have a couple, and like you said, I'm not going to say Antonio Brown. I'll go with Javon Hargrave. After not showing up on the stat sheet last week, he at the very least made his presence felt a couple times in this game. He had a sack and had 2 tackles for a loss in this game, so he was in the backfield when he at times this week, and he also matched his career high for sacks in its week 3. He had 2 last season, so that's good for him. Feel like he played, I guess, decently enough, but sadly for him, there weren't 11 of him out there because no one else appeared to be out there. So that was disappointing from that perspective. And who was the other player? Oh, Terrell Watson. That's right. Watson touched the ball twice on Sunday, but was still better than most of the rest of the Steelers. He had a 24-yard kick return, which, again, not really noteworthy, but hey, that's more yards than most of the Steelers players had. I mean, looking back through the stats here, it's more than Jesse James had. I know Bryant and Juju Smith-Schuster had more, but geez, they were terrible. Terrell Watson had 1 carry on a 3rd down, and I mentioned it on Twitter at the time that he was not going to get stopped by anyone on that run. It was a big 3rd and 1 play. I believe it was the Steelers' touchdown scoring drive, was it not?
I think so.
In any case, it was a big play, and he rumbled forward for 3 yards, and it was an impressive run. Yeah, 3 yards, not that great, but when no one else on the team plays well at all, that's what you get. So good job, Terrell Watson, and good job, Javon Hargrave, for impressing me this week. As far as disappointments go, Austin, I know you and I talked about doing something a little different, so we're each going to do our own different perspective or take on who disappointed us this week.
I'm actually going to do 2 because after really thinking about it, I don't actually have it written down. I'll say what I've written down first, but I actually have someone I can single out. Originally, I said I can't single person to choose as a disappointment, so I'm just going to choose the unit that performed the worst in my opinion. I'm going to say the offense performed the worst of any of the units. It's a really hard choice, though, but because all units were bad, and I wanted to be the disappointment of the week. They were really chasing it really hard. But after consideration and thinking about how much it pissed me off, I got to single out one person in particular, and that's Eli Rogers. Eli Rogers really, really screwed this game up. He was not on the offensive stat sheet. He fumbled on special teams when he was called upon. He didn't do really anything on punt returns. It's just, that's bad. He did bad, and he's the biggest disappointment for me this week. It's just, he probably did the worst out of anyone that I can think of. Not showing up on the offensive stat sheet for nothing is worse than Coates being targeted and dropping it. Like that is just how it is. That's really bad. So now let's hear your take.
Well, much in the same way you've had some time to consider it, I'm going to go with Artie Burns, and if anything, I'm doing it because of a Twitter post that tweet Alex Kozora had earlier today, with what he said was the worst run fill in Steelers defensive history, and it's honestly pretty hard to argue with him on this play. Austin, did you get to see the play I was talking about?
I did. He ran into the other Steeler way outside when I forget the runner, if it was Tariq Cohen or Jordan Howard, and they cut right in the middle of the hole that was giant and gaping that Artie Burns was supposed to be in, but he went to the outside of the other Steeler and got caught in him. And then it was just disgusting too, because he tried to go backwards and he fell. It looked like he jumped forward to try and make a tackle when he fell. But it was like the guy wasn't even anywhere close. It was just all around awful. I know what you're talking about.
It was very confusing. I guess to kind of paint a picture, there's kind of a wide open hole on the left side of the line. There's a gap between either the tight end and the left tackle. I don't know who the far blocker on the left end was, but it's him and the man he's matched up against. It actually might have been a receiver that far out. But there's a huge hole between, let's just say, the receiver and the left side of the line. So right here, it's the running back and Artie Burns. And rather than trying to fill the space in between so that Howard or Cohen would have to pick which side he was going, Burns ran directly into the Steelers defender on the left side. I equate that to your controller dying in the middle of a Madden game and your player just continues to run even though you're not changing direction. I don't know. I guess maybe that's more of an NHL thing since if your controller dies in Madden, your player would just stop running. Where in hockey, he'd just keep skating forward even though he's not moving his legs. I don't know. Watching it was one of the most bizarre things ever because I didn't understand, first of all, what he was thinking. Second of all, like, did he have a concussion or something? Like, I really don't understand what he was doing. And he just, wow. It was bad. It was really bad. So he gets my disappointment because he had been playing pretty well this season so far, and, he played terrible today. But then again, we've been saying that all podcast long, so we'll move on. Austin, before we finish things up on this game, I just wanted to say, or ask you rather, do you have any comments on the coaching, honestly? Because that's the one unit, if you will, that we really haven't ripped that much.
I'm going to comment on two things we actually didn't talk about. First, let's start with your question, coaching. The coaching just has not been good this whole entire season, at least for offense. Defense has been pretty decent so far in the past, not this game, but geez, they've been undisciplined when it comes to penalties. Not this game again, but just the whole season. I'm pretty sure the Steelers still lead the league in penalties. They did coming into this week with 23. I still think they have it at 29 with 6 more. But it's just really, really rough. Todd Haley is not doing. This is gonna be a bad comparison. This is a kind of hot take, but I think Todd Haley might be the Eddie Lacy of the Steelers. He was really hot for 1 year and then just immediately declined. It's just been. The Steelers' offense didn't perform as well as they should have last year. They were talking about averaging 30 points a game again. They didn't perform that. Todd Haley was still okay, but that's how Eddie Lacy's season went. He was hot, and then he was okay, and then he was just immediately bad. And that's where I feel like we're at right now. And I'm not sure – it's not all Haley's fault, but I feel like there's been a lot of questionable plays. In Week 1 and 2, we were talking about how, Martavis Bryant is taking screen passes and Le'Veon Bell's not being used. Then Week 2 was just another confusion where Le'Veon Bell is being force-fed down to a strong defensive line, and it wasn't working. Like, there's a bunch of bad play calling here, and I'm focusing on Todd Haley because I'm mostly frustrated with how the offense is performing, but that doesn't leave other coaches out of this too. I feel like most of the coaches on this team are doing bad. But before I switch it back to you, I want to also talk about the refereeing in this game. The refereeing in this game was absolutely awful for both sides. I'm not even going to just say that the Steelers got robbed. I think the Bears got robbed. Like you said, I was also in belief. I got to watch it. That on that first play in overtime, or not the first play, that big rush play for a touchdown, I thought that was a touchdown. I thought that the Bears got robbed there. But also on the next one, when it came back, they missed a blatant holding call on, I think it was Joe Hayden, who would have stopped the touchdown and would have came back. It would have came back to be a 2nd and 20. I don't think the Steelers would have stopped what was coming next, because they just let him rush for a long time. But there was also a easy missed pass interference on Martavis Bryant earlier in the game. There was there was a holding call on
Chicolo.
There you go. Yeah, that wasn't called, and there's just it was a bad refereeing game for both sides. I feel like the Bears got cheated. I feel like the Steelers got cheated, and that was a poor showing. I hate seeing that. Like a bunch of people will always complain when their team is not getting the calls, but I really think that referees just did bad this game for both sides. But I'll throw it back to you. What do you think of the coaching and the refereeing for this game?
First of all, I think you're taking a huge assumption here that Joe Hayden would have made that tackle based on the way that the team had been tackling so far.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still a holding call, and it still comes back, wouldn't it?
It would, but I'm saying, like, had he not been held there, I still don't know if he makes that tackle just because of the way they had been tackling. That's how badly the tackling had been. But you are correct. The officiating was terrible in this game. Terrible. And it doesn't matter that it's, I've never been one to really complain about officiating. And yeah, maybe I don't like a call here or there, but that's part of the game. I don't know. It felt strange. It felt like some things were being called more than others. There was just no consistency, and that's the big thing. If you're gonna if they're gonna be call happy like they were in the first 2 weeks of the season, that's fine. I mean, yeah, I'd prefer that they let him play, but as long as they're consistent, that's a big thing. I felt like there was just no consistency with the officiating in this game, and it was very odd. But regarding the coaching, I think, Austin, the hot take on Todd Haley is a little that you talked about. I think that's a little misguided. Going back to 2014, that's the hot year you were talking about. That's when they actually had everyone on the field. 2015, the Steelers had Le'Veon Bell for 6 games. Not even. They had him for like 5 games at most. And for some of those games, they didn't have Roethlisberger when they had Bell. So they never had the offense at full strength in 2015. And in 2016, Kobe Hamilton started a majority of the games at wide receiver. So that's all you really needed to know about the offense. I don't care who else you have on your team, but if you have a weak link like that, no offense to Kobe, I still think he's a solid player, but he's definitely not a starting caliber player as we saw in the AFC Championship game. It's going to be a problem, and I don't think the Steelers were going to ever threaten to average that many points. I thought they played pretty well under the given circumstances with such a lack of receiver depth at the time. So, yeah, the offense hasn't performed as well as they probably should have, but I also don't think that it's an Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson type of bad. I don't know how to compare it, I guess, but I don't think it's that bad. But on the other side, like I said, Keith Butler, that was disgusting. That's all that there is to it. And then again, the Mike Tomlin narrative, the coach teams against sub .500 teams, the losing record against them. Whatever. It's another game against another one of those teams, and it's another loss. I guess it's mental at this point. I don't know what else it could be. They can't beat all these teams in a single season. They can't do it. Yeah. So same thing like we've said with the Patriots. Until they actually do it, they won't do it. I won't believe that they'll do it. So yeah, we'll have a whole year plus to see if they can actually do it again. So yay. But finally, we can put this game behind us, unless if you have anything else you wanted to say, Austin.
Nope, not that I can think of.
And again, this is one of those games where you just throw away the tape and don't even look at it. I mean, the defense might look at the rush defense, but if you're the offense, you just throw this tape away and you just look at next week. It was bad. But the end of the Steelers game against the Bears was actually probably pushed back to like 3rd or 4th among the NFL headlines from the early games. Notably, the New England Patriots did what they should have done even against a quote-unquote inferior opponent when they weren't at their best. Tom Brady led a touchdown drive with time expiring to put the Patriots ahead of the Texans for the win. The Giants played their best game of the year and still managed to lose due to an amazing 61-yard game-winning kick by a rookie kicker who had recently been cut by the Bengals, fun fact. So the Eagles win there in dramatic fashion, and probably the craziest ending to a game I think I've seen in a while, maybe outside of the Bengals-Steelers wildcard game from a couple years ago. The Lions and Falcons. The Lions had just scored a touchdown with, what was it, like 5 seconds left, something like that?
I didn't get to watch the game, so I don't know.
Do you know what happened?
No clue. I had no idea this was controversial, to be honest. You're telling me news.
Okay, well, the Lions are driving down to score the go-ahead touchdown to win this game with time expiring. Both teams are out of timeouts. The Lions score a touchdown. Golden Tate extends his arms while being tackled. It's a touchdown. The Lions go ahead with just a few seconds remaining. The play goes under review. So I guess it's not really controversial in the sense that it was called correctly here, Austin, but it's questionable the rule, I guess, if you will. Upon further review, Golden Tate had been brought down maybe not even a half yard short of the goal line, which means that there's an automatic 10-second runoff because he was brought down in bounds, so the Lions lost.
Wow, that's messed up. So if they didn't, so if they got the touchdown, they would have been up 32 to 30 is what you're saying.
There's that, and if they had called the play correctly the first time, I don't remember exactly how many seconds were left. They might have actually been able to do something. They might have been able to run another play or something. But the point being is that they that seems like a problem. Like, I understand the 10-second runoff, but I feel like the 10-second runoff should not exist maybe inside of 2 minutes or something. That's a very strange and obviously a rare circumstance, but it feels like the Lions were robbed of a chance to win, if you ask me. So that's definitely the most interesting game from the early 1 o'clock games. But there was a 9:30 game in London, and boy, I don't know how many people saw this coming, but I wouldn't have been surprised to hear that the Ravens lost to the Jaguars, but the way they lost, Austin, was incredible. 44-7. A fake punt while up 37-0. The Jaguars showed no mercy in London. Absolutely took the Ravens to the woodshed, and boy, that was quite a game to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah, the game was really kind of disgusting the whole time. The Jaguars never had a point where they were out of control. The only touchdown scored was Benjamin Watson. It was after all the Jaguars starters came out. There was no Calais Campbell on the field. I don't believe Dante Fowler Jr. was on the field. A.J. Boye was off. Jalen Ramsey was off. It took all of that, all of the stars on defense for them to score 7 points, and it was really rough. They still had to fight for those too. They were just really bad altogether. So if you're feeling bad about the loss to the Bears today, there's that to look forward to. We didn't get blown out by the Bears, while the Ravens got blown out by the Jaguars. So.
Oh, and on top of that, geez, as if the Ravens didn't have more bad luck coming to them. They lost, 3 more players over the course of the game?
Something like that. Jeremy Maclin came back, but they lost Tony Jefferson. I don't remember if he came back, and then Brent Urban, the defensive end. I don't remember if he came back either.
It's just it's a carousel for them. I don't really know what they have to do, but they're struggling. But speaking of the Ravens, the Steelers are opening on the road next week, and they're back in Baltimore for the first Steelers-Ravens game of the year. The Steelers have not won there since 2012, where one of the original ageless wonders for the Steelers, and Charlie Batch, led the Steelers to victory over what would become the Super Bowl champions for the Baltimore Ravens. So that's a fun fact. We'll get more into that game for our next episode, but elsewhere in the AFC North, a complete sweep as the Bengals and Browns also lose. The Browns rally back to make it a close game against the Colts, but could not win. And the Bengals blow a win in Lambeau Field, where it certainly looked like they were going to win that game, but they found a way to bungle that game away, and not a banner day for the North for sure.
No, all AFC North teams lost today. So I mean, that's a good thing for the Steelers. It's a good thing for everyone in the AFC North. No one moved up. No one did anything. They just stayed in the same position. Basically, just lost a game each of them. So.
Any other notable finals? I didn't get to see any of the 4 o'clock games.
Sherman tried killing Marcus Mariota.
Actually, I did hear about that. He got 3 penalties on one play.
Yeah.
That was a different play, though.
But that one play coming in on Mariota, he came screaming. Mariota was already going to the sideline, and had Sherman hit Mariota, I'm pretty confident he would have got knocked out by Taylor Lewan, because he actually ran into his own guy. I don't think he hurt him, but he hit him really hard, and it was out of bounds already, and it was just really rough. The Titans ended up beating the Seahawks, and I'm rooting for the Titans. I really like the Titans. I don't want to see the Jaguars in the playoffs. I don't want to see the Texans in the playoffs. I want to see the Titans do something. So, and the Colts are like the worst team in the NFL without Andrew Luck.
Got the W today.
Yeah, they did, and Brissett did it with him. So I guess I can't say without Andrew Luck, but I don't know. I still think they're a terrible team. It was against the Browns. So can we really say much about that? Other than that, I don't know. The Redskins just wrapped up their game like only 2 hours ago. And they kind of ruined the Raiders in surprise fashion, sort of.
Kind of. It's not like manhandling, but it's manhandling within reason, if you will. 27-10, was it?
Something like that. I am actually not confident on the score.
I'll check it right now, but yeah, kind of an interesting week for the NFL for sure. A ton of things going on.
I have one more thing. Phillip Rivers absolutely was horrible today. Horrible. He threw 3 interceptions in the first half. And the gross thing was they were still in that game. It was 17-10 almost the entire game until like the last 2 minutes where Kareem Hunt got a garbage time touchdown and made it 24-10. The Chargers are just – they're something else. They're an anomaly. I don't understand what happens with them. They have the most blown fourth-quarter leads in the NFL in the past 2 seasons. It might be 3, but I think it's 2, with 11. They've blown 11 fourth-quarter leads in the past 2 seasons. The Chargers are that close to – like, just think about that. That means they lost by very few points. They blew it all in the fourth quarter 11 times. This team has almost had 11 more wins in the past 2 seasons. That is so many more wins. That is so different from their record of how they finished. Like, just imagine that. Like, that's being as good as the top teams if they just scored like 2 more points in some of these games.
Jeez. Well, it was 27-10, and I'm reading an ESPN article right now by Jeremy Fowler. The Steelers' offense has failed to produce more than 20 points in a game through 3 weeks. They put up 282 yards against the winless Bears this week. Again, the road games, Ben Roethlisberger, 21 of 25 for 291 and a TD when targeting Antonio Brown, 25 of 50 for 206 and an interception when targeting everyone else. Wow. That's quite telling for sure. Yeah, the next stop is Baltimore, where the Steelers have averaged just over 12 points a game over the last 3 years. So no signs that it's going to get any better next week. But like I said, we'll get into that later. I guess, is there anything else to look ahead to with the silver lining going into next week?
Tua should be back, so that's good. That's really about it.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I guess, like you said, the good news is the Ravens probably aren't feeling too good about themselves either. So both teams have a lot to work on going into next week. Austin, are you all set for tonight?
I'm all set.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on what is certainly a down and dreary day for Steeler Nation. Check us out on Twitter at Stronger_Steel, Instagram at Stronger_Steel_NFL, Facebook at Stronger Than Steel Podcast, and check us out on SoundCloud and YouTube under the same name. If you have any questions about the show, feel free to email us, ask us questions that we'd love to answer or have feedback for you. Our email is strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Oh my God. It's been a long day. StrongerThanSteelNFL.blogspot.com. It's, oh my goodness. We've had an hour of discussion here, Austin, and I feel like we could talk for 9 more and we'd still not have enough to come up with the sorry state of the Steelers against these bad teams.
Yeah, we really could. In this kind of loss, it's really hard not to talk about what went wrong and expand on it and see what's been. You keep going on to a big ladder of what started what and how it's been the whole season, all of that. So
I guess at the very least, you could have kind of said the same thing about their Week 3 loss against the Eagles last year. In fact, you might even say that was worse because they got blown out in the manner that they did. So I guess maybe that's better. Although I believe the Eagles were 2-0 at the time, so that might have been a little different. But in any case, the good news is that it's just one game, so it's not make or break yet. But obviously, you hope that's the worst the Steelers play all year. You really do. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And Austin, you have a good night, my friend. There hopefully are better days ahead. So, from all of us here, have a great night, everybody.
good night.